From Maid to Billionaire, the Heiress they tried to hide Part 2. Chapter 7 The Midnight Escape. Rosehill always seemed to listen. Its halls echoed too loudly. Its walls creaked too conveniently. Secrets had a way of slithering through the air vents and landing at the feet of those who knew how to weaponize them. And Clarisse Moreaux had spent 2 decades turning whispers into control. So when Lina didn't report to the linen room that morning, when Clarisse's personal file cabinet showed signs of disturbance, when Bellamy found the West Wing's attic latch half open, Clarisse knew. She didn't scream. She didn't confront. She smiled. And summoned Mr. Maddox. Lina was collecting tea trays from the guest suites when 2 men in grey coats appeared in the servant hallway, official-looking, unsmiling, mechanical. Theo, trimming rose stems nearby, went still the moment he saw them. Clarisse floated in behind them, silk dressing gown fluttering like a spectre. "Oh, Evelina," she said, drawing out the name like a weapon, "there's someone here to speak with you." Lina froze. No one called her Evelina. Not even Clarisse. One of the men held a clipboard. "Transfer order," he said flatly. "Relocation to St. Halcyon House of Reform. Effective immediately." Lina blinked. "What?" Clarisse's smile was porcelain. "You've outgrown Rosehill, my dear. It's time you moved on, somewhere more suited to your talents. Scrubbing floors, peeling potatoes, and disappearing." Theo stepped forward. "You can't just." "She can," Lina cut in, grabbing his arm. "But I won't let her." Clarisse tilted her head. "You think a girl with dishpan hands and a scandal in her bloodstream can challenge me? You poor, sweet orphan." She leaned in, voice a whisper. "You think you're a Moreaux, but I raised you a maid. And that's what the world will always see." That night, Clarisse locked Lina in her servants' quarters. The door was chained. The guards stationed outside. The transfer would happen at 6 a.m. sharp. But Theo wasn't done yet. 1:43 a.m. A sudden scream echoed through the halls, followed by a blast of smoke rising from the East Wing kitchen. Fire alarms shrieked. Staff scrambled. Bellamy ran barefoot across the marble. Clarisse screamed at maids to grab water buckets. Panic shattered the estate's usual symphony of silence. Lina sat up in bed, coughing. A knock at the wall. Then a hiss. "Lina! Back wall! Go! Now!" She yanked her mattress aside. Behind it, a loosened panel, the one Theo had once used to hide biscuits during ration week. Behind that, a crawl space. She didn't hesitate. She pulled her satchel over her shoulder, the one holding the original will, the deed, and her mother's letter, and climbed into the darkness. Theo met her in the greenhouse minutes later, face streaked with soot, clutching a canister of smoke pellets. "It wasn't a real fire," he panted. "Just enough gas and chaos. But we've got 20 minutes max before they realize it." "You are dangerously good at sabotage," Lina said. "Roses taught me. Remind me to build you a throne in my future palace." They slipped through the east gate just as the estate guards turned their attention back to the fire. Lina looked back once, at the windows of the only home she'd ever known, the gilded cage where her birthright had been scrubbed out of existence. No more. The girl who had scrubbed those floors was gone. In her place was Evelina Victoire Moreaux. And she was done running. She was done hiding. It was time the world learned the truth. Chapter 8 The Attorney with Secrets. The morning after the escape was a blur of cab rides, windburn, and Theo's whispered reassurances as Lina clutched a satchel full of dynamite, not literally, but the legal kind, the original will, the birth certificate, the deed, and a name Clarice had tried to bury beneath designer carpets and family lies. Evelina Victoire Moreaux. And now, Evelina was ready to be heard. But to bring down the house of Moreaux, she needed someone who didn't just know the law, she needed someone who had once burned down an empire with it. They arrived in a lesser-known corner of Paris, where the streets were still cobbled, and old cafes leaned into one another like gossiping grandmothers. The name on the brass plaque beside the office door read, F. Dumas, legal advisor not currently licensed. Lina raised an eyebrow. Not licensed. Theo grinned. Technically disbarred. Technically. He got a queen indicted for tax evasion and made an archbishop cry on live television. He'll know what to do. Lina knocked twice. The door opened, and revealed chaos. Stacks of case files, open books, half-drunk espresso cups, and a man behind the desk in a perfectly wrinkled three-piece suit. He had silver hair, a French nose, and the kind of piercing blue eyes that said, "I know everything about you already." François Dumas. He looked at Lina as though he'd been expecting her for years. "You're either lost, or about to ruin someone very powerful," he said in flawless English. "Can't it be both?" she replied. Dumas smiled. "Come in." For the next hour, Lina laid it all out. The birth certificate. The deed. The signed will. The letter from her mother. And her story, orphaned, raised a maid in her own family's mansion, nearly shipped off to a workhouse, and now standing in a legal office with her entire past crackling in her hands like lightning. Dumas didn't interrupt once. He sat back in his chair, occasionally whistling low under his breath, flipping through documents like rare treasures. When he finally looked up, his eyes were serious. Calculating. "Do you have any idea what this means?" "That I've been robbed of everything." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "No. It means you're not just the heiress. You are, by the last signed and witnessed will of Lionel Moreaux, the majority stakeholder of the entire Moreaux fortune. Rosehill, the vineyards in Bordeaux, the shipping contracts in Marseille, the art holdings in Vienna." "How much?" she asked quietly. "Roughly 80% of the Moreaux empire. If you play this right." Lina's heart thudded once, hard. "And if I don't?" Dumas leaned back. "Clarice keeps everything. You vanish. And in a few months, the original will get lost in a fire like everything else that threatens them." He stood, walked to a small safe hidden behind a bookshelf, and pulled out a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. "But that's not why you came to me, is it?" He poured. "Red as rubies. You want the empire. You want your name back. And most of all, you want them to pay." Lina didn't smile. But she didn't blink either. "How do we start?" Dumas raised his glass. "With a press conference, and a little war." Theo clinked his glass with hers, wide-eyed and proud. Lina looked out the office window, where the Paris skyline shimmered beneath a gold-tinged dusk. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was coming for everything. Chapter 9: The DNA test on the dessert spoon. The invitation arrived embossed in gold, draped in roses, and sealed with the Moreaux family crest, the same crest Clarice once had stitched into Lina's scrubbing apron to remind her where she stood. This time, it was different. The event, a lavish charity gala at the Musée des Lumières, a jewel-box museum known for chandeliers imported from Versailles and violinists who played champagne to a boil. The hosts: Clarisse Moreaux and her golden son, Julian. The guest list was a who's who of European elite. Fashion moguls, oilers, socialite duchesses with empty titles and overflowing diamond vaults. The press would be everywhere. It was the perfect place for Lina to set the next domino in motion. The plan was simple in theory. Dumas handled the technicalities. Theo handled the timing. Lina handled the risk. She'd infiltrate the event dressed as waitstaff. At the right moment, she'd swap Julian's dessert spoon, the one he'd used to dig into whatever over-designed mousse was being served, with a pre-sanitized, barcode-coded testing spoon. The spoon would be collected and immediately taken to Dumas' lab partner, who specialized in discrete DNA paternity results. If Julian was, as Clarisse insisted, the sole child of Lionel Moreaux, the test would show it. But if Julian was only half of that legacy, then Lina wouldn't just be a girl with papers. She'd be the true bloodline. The museum shimmered like a dream. Every surface glowed with polished history. A violin quartet played Bach's air on the G-string as guests glided through rooms of gold-framed oil paintings and Murano glass chandeliers. Lina wore a starched black uniform, hair pulled into a tight bun, clipboard in hand, eyes downcast, invisible in plain sight. It was a role she knew well. Only this time, she wasn't meant to be here. She chose to be. Julian arrived on the red carpet flanked by Clarisse and 3 publicists. He wore a custom midnight blue velvet tuxedo with a platinum tie-pin and the confidence of a man who still believed he'd won the game before it even began. Remember, Dumas had said, "You only need 5 seconds." At 9:17 p.m., the dessert course was announced. The kitchen buzzed with flutes of champagne and domed silver platters. Lina found her target tray, table 1, Julian's table, and made her way across the parquet floor, the spoon concealed in her apron pocket, pre-labeled and sterile. She approached Julian with the tray balanced perfectly. "Monsieur Moreaux," she said softly, keeping her eyes averted, "your chocolate feuillantine with Tahitian vanilla foam." He barely looked at her. And in one practiced motion, as he took the dish, she replaced the spoon. Done. Her heart pounded so loud she was sure someone would hear. Julian lifted the spoon, twirled it like he was auditioning for an absurd food documentary, and took the first bite. The camera flashes popped. A reporter cooed. Clarisse fake laughed into a crystal flute. And Lina slipped back into the kitchen. 3 days later, Lina sat in Dumas' office, staring at a sealed manila envelope. She didn't move. Theo sat beside her, vibrating with nervous energy. "We're about to crack their castle open like a creme brulee," he whispered. Lina exhaled and opened the envelope. Inside, a single-page report. 2 DNA profiles. One marked subject a Julian Moreaux. The other subject be Lina Victoire Moreaux. Result: half-sibling match confirmed. Shared paternity, 99.98% probability. Shared maternity, 0%. Lina stared at the line until it blurred. Her father had been Lionel Moreaux. The man Clarisse swore was her husband, Julian's father, the family patriarch whose portrait hung in the grand staircase. He was also her father. Which meant Clarisse had lied about everything. Which meant Julian was not the heir. Which meant Lina was. She rose to her feet, shoulders straight, voice like steel. "They've ruled over my house," my name, and my history for long enough. She looked to Dumas. Now it's time for the world to know the truth. Chapter 10: The press conference that shocks the country. The world had seen the Moreaux family through a lens of perfection for decades: crystal flutes, vineyard galas, inherited silk, and diamond lineage. They were the picture of old wealth and polished lies. Until now. Until her. Until Lina Victoire Moreaux stood up and decided to rewrite the ending, not in whispers, but in lights and cameras. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp at Hotel de Grand Ciel, the most luxurious hotel in central Paris, with baroque ceilings, columns of Carrara marble, and a press room gilded like Versailles. The news had been teased anonymously the day before. A forgotten heir. A scandal that could collapse one of France's most powerful dynasties. Press conference live, Thursday. The gossip pages exploded. Speculation ran wild. Some said it was a PR stunt. Others said it was a betrayal from inside the Moreaux house. But no one was ready for what actually walked out from behind the velvet curtain. Lina emerged in silence. Gone was the maid's uniform. Gone were the calloused hands and the downcast eyes. She wore a custom black satin Dior jumpsuit with a dramatic cape that trailed behind her like the shadow of her stolen past. Her hair was slicked into a low knot. Her makeup was flawless, sharp enough to cut. A single ruby pendant rested over her collarbone, one that once belonged to her mother. To her right, François Dumas, sharp as ever in a steel grey suit. To her left, Theo, less formal, but radiating quiet pride. Flashbulbs exploded. Gasps. Cameras. Murmurs. But Lina didn't flinch. She stepped up to the podium. "My name," she began, voice calm but powerful, "is Lina Victoire Moreaux." A hush fell over the room like snow. For 18 years, I was raised inside Rosehill estate. Not as a daughter. Not as family. But as a maid. A ghost. A secret. I scrubbed the floors my mother once walked in heels. I was fed scraps in a kitchen my bloodline built. I was told I was nothing. That I came from nothing. She held up a document, the birth certificate, and unfolded it with a clean snap. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when buried under marble and money. The cameras zoomed in. Gasps echoed. Then the will. Then the DNA results. Each paper handed to the front row journalists, one by one, like bullets loaded into the narrative. Lionel Moreaux was my father. I have the proof. I have the blood. And I have the right. I am not a scandal. I am not a mistake. I am not an employee. I am the rightful heir. She looked into the cameras, directly at them, and finished. And I'm here to take back what was stolen from me. The room erupted. Questions hurled from every direction. Miss Moreaux, when did you discover your identity? Do you intend to press criminal charges against Clarisse? What does this mean for Julian's inheritance? Will you be reclaiming Rosehill? Dumas stepped in to handle the frenzy. Theo held back a tear, overwhelmed with pride. And Lina simply stood tall, regal in her silence, as the flashes washed over her like revenge in strobe lighting. Elsewhere. In a penthouse suite across the city, Clarisse Moreaux dropped her champagne flute. It shattered like her legacy. And in Rosehill estate, Julian stared blankly at the TV, watching his birthright vanish in high definition. The world now knew who Lina Victoire Moreaux was. And she had just fired the first shot. Chapter 11 The lawsuit heard around the world. The world's reaction to Lina's press conference was instant combustion. Every major network played it on a loop. Fashion blogs fawned over her couture cape. Legal analysts dissected the will's authenticity. Gossip columns labeled her the heiress in exile. TikTok exploded with side-by-side videos of Maid Lina and Moreaux. Lina #tagged #from mop to Moreaux and #justice for Lina. But the reaction inside the Moreaux empire. Pure panic. 2 days later, Clarice struck back with ice-cold precision. At exactly 9 a.m., the Moreaux legal team filed an emergency injunction with the Paris High Court. Their accusation: the woman known as Lina Victoire Moreaux has falsified inheritance documents, engaged in identity fraud, and unlawfully defamed the Moreaux family. They claimed the will was forged, the DNA tampered. The press conference: a theatrical publicity stunt by a fame-hungry imposter. Within hours, the headlines flipped. Clarice Moreaux strikes back, heiress accused of fraud. The public was whiplashed. The battle lines were drawn. But Lina wasn't rattled. She had been underestimated her whole life. Now, it was her favorite weapon. Lina paced the office, barefoot in silk pajamas, hair loose for once. "We need to hit back," she said. "Not with rumors. With something they can't spin." Theo, seated on the windowsill, chimed in, like actual footage of Clarice throwing the original will into the fire. Lina froze. "Wait. You said that night, you saw her do it. But the security feeds were wiped." "Wiped from the house system, yes. But," Theo said, grinning, "not from the gardener's storage hub. Remember when Julian accused me of stealing cuttings and put up extra surveillance? He pulled out a flash drive. Clarice forgot to wipe the greenhouse backups." The footage was grainy but undeniable. Clarice, in a silk robe, storming into the study fireplace room. She held a parchment envelope. The same kind Lina had found in the locked drawer. She unfolded the will, sneered, muttered something inaudible. Then lit it on fire, tossed it into the hearth, and watched it burn with a satisfied smile. Then, chillingly, she turned to Bellamy and said, "Now it's as if Lina never existed." The next morning, Dumas filed a countersuit. The claim: willful destruction of legal documents, fraud, obstruction of inheritance law, emotional abuse, and conspiracy to erase a legal heir. And just for fun, attempted unlawful imprisonment. Thanks to the workhouse stunt. The lawsuit hit like thunder. Lina's team didn't go quietly. They sent the footage to a select circle of journalists. Not for broadcast. Just for leverage. An anonymous leak ensured every tabloid in France knew it existed. Now Clarice wasn't just a grieving widow. She was a liar. A legacy thief. A social vampire. As cameras camped outside Dumas' office, Lina emerged in head-to-toe ivory, a nod to her mother's iconic gown. She said just one thing. "I did not forge anything. But she did burn everything that proved I was born to belong here. And I kept the ashes." Inside Rosehill, Clarice screamed so loudly a vase shattered. Julian drank half a bottle of stolen champagne and said nothing. Outside, the world watched as the girl in grey became the woman with fire in her blood. And she was only just beginning. Chapter 12 The Mother's Hidden Diary. The fire had gone cold in the Rosehill study. Not because the embers had died, but because Lina had taken the room back, symbolically, spiritually, legally. It was her father's desk now. Her mother's hearth. Her house. The lawsuit was live. The media frenzy had taken root. Clarice was hiding behind legal walls, Julian had gone silent, and Dumas had begun carving legal precedent out of fire and glass. But Lina was restless. Not angry, haunted. There were still blanks in the story. Things that didn't sit right. Phrases Clarice had whispered that echoed a little too long. Threats from Julian that sounded more like rehearsed lines. And above it all, her mother's portrait. Always watching. That night, she returned to the study alone. It was silent, save for the occasional tick of the old grandfather clock. Moonlight poured in through the diamond-paned windows, casting fractured silver across the stone floor. The fireplace loomed before her, regal and dark, its mantel carved with roses and serpents. The same fireplace where Clarice had burned the will. The same place Lina had found her name hidden in ashes. And now, something else called to her. A whisper, not in sound, but in instinct. She lit a taper candle, knelt by the hearth, and began running her hands along the inside of the fireplace frame. The soot clung to her fingers. Her gown streaked black. But she didn't stop. Then, click. A soft shift behind the left mantel bracket. Her breath caught. She pressed again. And the panel slid open. Inside, a narrow compartment, dusty but untouched. Wrapped in a linen scarf aged by time was a small leather-bound book. No lock. No clasp. Just a gold-embossed monogram on the front. AVM. Amelia Vivienne Moreaux. Lina swallowed hard. She took the book gently and sat on the floor, heart in her throat. And opened her mother's diary. The pages were written in elegant, looping French, with a few English flourishes. The ink had faded in places, but the emotions were preserved, pressed into the pages like wildflowers and grief. The entries began joyfully. Lina took her first steps today. Lionel cried. I didn't, I laughed. She walks like she's already running toward destiny. Then, tension. Clarice has started staying in Lionel's wing. She's everywhere lately, lingering like she belongs. Julian has arrived. His, not Lionel's. No one will say it out loud, but we all know. They're trying to erase me. Gaslighting me. Bellamy moved my jewelry by mistake again. I found a sedative in my tea. Then fear. They forged Lionel's signature. I saw the papers. He's been too ill to notice. And they won't let me speak to the lawyers. I confronted Clarice. She smiled. That terrifying smile. The one she wore at my wedding. I don't feel safe in this house anymore. And then, the final page. The handwriting more frantic. Letters sharper, rushed. If I die, it won't be an accident. And it won't be natural. It will be because they needed me gone. For the fortune. For the name. For their son. But I will not vanish quietly. I have left proof. I have left my daughter. She will find the truth. They can silence me. But they cannot silence blood. Lina's hand shook. The diary slid from her lap. She sat frozen on the stone floor of the study, the candle flickering dangerously close to the pages. Outside, a storm had begun, thunder cracking in the hills. A wind howled down the chimney like a scream. She had always known her mother had died unexpectedly. Now she knew it hadn't just been unexpected. It had been engineered. They hadn't just hidden Lina to steal the inheritance. They had destroyed Amelia to make way for Clarice and Julian. And now, with this diary, Lina didn't just have the truth. She had a confession in her mother's hand. Lina stood, straightened her spine, clutched the diary tight, and whispered into the flames. They may have buried you, but I will make them remember your name. Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.